What's up, everybody? Welcome to NFT Marketplace and Dojo. My name is Carmen. We have Captain Metaverse Nathmar with us today. We might be joined by Sean and Ray relatively shortly, but we're going to jump right into it. It's been an extremely busy week. I guess extremely busy 2 weeks because we didn't have a chance to really catch up with you guys last week. So I guess we'll do an overall recap. The last 2 weeks have been kind of interesting when it comes to the market at large, where we see the market going. I think we're getting drops now that give us a better indication of what matters and what doesn't. And I think as we go through this, I guess we can talk about it. So let's talk about the comics at first. So we have a smattering of comics over the last 2 weeks, and I really want to draw attention to the comic book types. We got really classic, I will call them, A-list key comic books. When you look at a Ghost Rider, right? First appearance of Ghost Rider is, in my opinion, all day long. There he is. What's up, guys?
Hey, what's up, guys? It's been a while.
Yes. So we're jumping in. We're talking about the comics right now, and really, I guess what I was getting at is we're starting to see different tier levels of comics. And I think we've talked about that in the past, but we got a smattering of comic book types over the last 2 weeks. So we've got our A-list key issue book, which is our Marvel Spotlight 5, right? That Ghost Rider book, since forever, even before VeVe, I think has always been a book that people ride or die for. So that would be like this A-list book. And then we also got the B-listers. We got Mystique, right, with that Captain Marvel book. We got Moira McTaggart, which would probably even be like C-list. Because if you're not really in deep with X-Men, and really you're not in deep with current Hickman writing right now, and when I say current, I mean over the last 3 years, that's even just an obscure name.
Maybe I had no idea who she was. I had no idea.
She was in the animated series back in the day for my Saturday morning cartoon 90s kids. She was in there a bunch. She had something to do, we got her with the Phoenix Saga a little bit. So still a key issue, but as far as tiers go, not a huge hammer. And then we got these which I think we've now deemed dollar bin books, right? They're going to list for $6.99. Maybe they'll pump to $10, but then they'll probably fall back to $6.50 or even $5.99. What do we think about these comics and the nature of comics now that we're in it, right? Have you noticed something dealing with Generation 1 comic books, right? These key issues, Fantastic Four 1. Is there a correlation somewhere? So Nathmar, we're going to start with you.
Well, yeah, I think there is some correlation to some things going on in either the comics or Disney Plus or MCU. Actually, literally before Moira McTaggart, that comic came out, I posted on my Comics Dojo one article that says somebody said that Moira are they trying to turn her into a bad guy? So there was some storyline that she's very active in right now, so they're kind of pumping her up. So there is some activity with some of these drops that they're with current events, and I don't know, since if you guys aren't familiar, Moira is actually she was only a periphery character before, just a side character, but lately they made her a key character that she's helped, and she has powers that are helping the X-Men resurrect themselves, and so they never die. So she's really key in one of the current storylines. So so there is I think there is some relation with that. There's Mystique, there's Black Widow, the origin of Black Widow, first She-Hulk, and joins the Fantastic Four, because there's a She-Hulk show coming up, right? I think so. So they're probably hyping that up. There's the first appearance of Peggy Carter. She showed up in the Disney Plus, and her shield came up in the Doctor Strange movie. So there's some correlation there. The Bishop, I told you, but I didn't verify it. Somebody mentioned that Bishop might appear in the Doctor Strange movie.
I
Not
have
verified.
heard everyone is going to appear in Doctor Strange.
Everyone.
Just everyone.
Everyone's
Well,
gonna.
a few things I'm interested in. I don't know. I think these comic books are pumping. I think these VeVe comic books are marketing for floppy comic books that are being written, because I used to think that maybe they were foreshadowing some MCU stuff, which might be the case.
No possible. No possible.
But I know, I guess I'm assuming, I guess there aren't really many comic book readers anyway in a lot of these, as far as the buyers and sellers in the VeVe-verse. But, that Moira McTaggart book, I believe, and I'm only current up to like issue 20 of the new X-Men run. Like, I've read up through all of them. So her power is that she reincarnates herself, but she's only able to do it, I believe, 13 times. And every time she dies, she so she realizes that she's a mutant without realizing she's a mutant. She dies, is reborn, and realizes that she can control whether or not Armageddon happens based on the way that she lives her life. And that's where Powers of X and House of X and all those sort of things work. But I believe, spoiler alert, that we are in the comic continuum, we're at the end of that run, where now Moira is, I believe, again, haven't read, because I'm a Marvel Unlimited guy, so I'm 3 months behind too. But her and Mystique, I also think in the books have this thing. So if the comic narrative is coming to a head, and that narrative involves Mystique and Moira, this is all probably marketing for Mystique and Moira. When you go into your comic book store, it's on the shelf, and you're like, oh, I just bought the NFT for that. I just bought her first appearance. Oh, this is the newest comic book that just came out. That's what I'm starting to see more of, because the Peggy Carter, her issue 1 just dropped this week. So there's, hold on.
Nice.
I've got it somewhere. quick sell.
Nice.
Right. So this just dropped this week. So this is the 1 in 10.
That's cool. That's
Captain
awesome.
Carter book. That's her first appearance in a comic. I didn't know it was her. For some reason, I thought she was in other stuff, but apparently, first appearance in a book, though we've seen her in other places.
Well, as Captain Carter.
Yes, correct.
As Captain Carter.
Yeah. So again, I wonder if like the VeVe stuff is marketing to pump what we're gonna see when you go off the rack in the comic book stores, and then I wonder if the comic book sales do well, if that then translates to what we might see on the screen a couple years later. I'm trying to figure out if there's a method to the madness where one thing feeds the next,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure of the. So I noticed there's a lot more correlation with physical comics, right? If something happens, like there's a lot of sales of physical comics, or people trying to sell them. For NFTs, I noticed the correlation is still not as much as physical comics, but I think it's gonna get there because they're just really close connections, I think, with some of the drops they had with what's going on. So I think it's inevitable that it's gonna continue picking up, especially like you say, if Peggy Carter shows up, if Moira, becomes like a big bad villain, now for the X-Men moving forward, right? So I think
I would say real interesting on this is that we haven't actually been in VeVe with the comics when the corresponding show has come out, right? Like we all know physical comics, we've seen how like they explode leading up to the show, and then they sometimes trickle back down. Mm-hmm. We actually haven't had that, I don't think, with a VeVe comic yet, right? Like She-Hulk might be the first one. Doctor Strange, even, if for whatever reason Mr. Fantastic shows up, possibly, mm-hmm. But ultimately, like, we haven't really seen what effect the movies are going to have on VeVe spec, right? And I also think right now it's kind of a tough time to make too many deductions because, the market's down. Everything's down, right? whether or not you're talking SPY, whether or not you're talking crypto, or even that. So I am curious if, because, Carmen, like you said, we're starting to see where those dollar benders are coming, right? And I think it's become that much more drastic. And I'm curious on the next bump if we continue to see, the big five, tier one, tier twos rocket back, form new highs. But then you've got like you said, the dollar bins. I don't know that they're going to leave $10. I just don't. I don't think they do. I think people try to sell them and get into use them to flip up.
That's what I think. I am going to make a call though, and if it happens, I get to say that I said it and I knew it was going to happen. So the Punisher is back in Marvel Comics. He is now a warlord for the Hand.
Yeah.
He showed up in Daredevil. He showed up in Daredevil 3 recently on the last page, and now he's starting his own run of comic books. They're starting his own narrative. I think we either get, I hope we don't get like a Punisher #1. I hope we get an ASM 129. Like if we get Amazing Spider-Man 129, that would be dope. But I think, we'll probably, hopefully they don't do us dirty and do a Punisher 1. But I will say this, Ghost Rider, Marvel Spotlight 5 dropped, and what just rebooted? Ghost Rider 1 just restarted.
Yeah.
So again, I think hopefully we get a Punisher comic book within the next 2 weeks.
Well, can I get my Moon Knight book first, and then you can have them? I want my Werewolf by Night 32.
But are you gonna? What if they drop Moon Knight 1 instead of Werewolf by Night?
I just love Moon Knight. It's like my second favorite character in the Marvel universe. I think it's like a Batman, but if he had dissociative personality disorder and just love to F stuff up and actually kill people. I mean, it's like, that's my ideal situation.
I'm very excited for it. I have a Werewolf by Night 32 graded 8.0 in my war chest in my office. That is never going to see the light of day, and it will go with me.
I sold
to the grave. I was going to say, Nothmore, what do you have? I mean, what are you putting? Like 3-4 of them?
I had 5 of them, and I sold them all last year. Sadly, it was painful. I sold them all.
Yeah, but you bought a house.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Oh my God, I lost my comic books, but I bought a house. Okay, that's
yeah. Okay, so that's the landscape of comics. I think we're starting to see, and we're going to start to see these tier ones kind of take off, and then you've got these like A-list keys, like your Marvel Spotlight 5. Werewolf by Night 32 is probably coming, those sorts of things. Then you got these, like, I think, B and C listers. I would even consider like that ASM 50 is probably one of those. It's a really good example of like, I don't know. I'm never going to say never, because if we hit a crazy run, it's probably going to pop. But these are like $25 to $50 NFT comics that tend to just float around there. And then you're going to have your dollar bin books. So anybody who has comic knowledge has a bit of an edge. You just kind of have to know what to buy and when to buy it.
Do you think Ghost Rider is going to end up popping up into the B and the A and the B tier? I think I'll be interested to see when he does. I think it's when he shows up in the movies. Do we see him join? I think it was not one that said like Daredevil 1-ish.
I think it's at that level. I think Marvel Spotlight 1 is the same level as DD1. But even Daredevil 1 is undervalued, right? Come on, like $80-$90. That should be like $200-$300 NFT, I think, down the line. So I think it's undervalued.
For sure. All right, so the next series of drops that we got over the last 2 weeks, I'll call it like your high art. These are like the art collector pieces. One was that Matt Gondek stuff, the weapons rack, and that it's called the Failure of Control, or the portrait that he had. I was talking to Nothmore about this before we went live. I think these high art pieces are good examples of people. I'm not going to say, listen, I'm never going to say that someone's in this for the wrong reasons. Everybody has their own right to be in here, and whether you're here to make some quick cash or whatever, But I think those pieces are good examples of art for art's sake and appreciating art and buying them for wanting to have them. And if you try to flip high art pieces, I think you're going to get burned because they're just, especially when you see the mints like getting really, really crazy. I just don't think it's going to happen. The likelihood of you getting crushed is very high, right? And I had said this, like I bought the weapons racks. It took me, however, like 2 weeks to track them down. I kind of hit them at the price points I wanted. I wanted mint 1992 for the sake of the LA riots. I just think it's the perfect thing. I'm too much of like a Sublime punk rock fan to not have that. And as like I'm wearing my H2O shirt right now, right? Like if I that's a me fan thing, right? Where I love these things. I have them listed on the marketplace for 5,000 gems a piece because if someone wants to like hit me over the head with money, there's a price for everything. But like the reason why they're 5,000 gems is because like maybe one other person would ever want to give me 5,000 gems for them. And I own them as a fan for the art and the music and that period of history and its socio-cultural and socioeconomic sort of impact historically on the country. So I'm not saying I bought them for the right reasons, but I'm buying them for like something that matters a lot to me, as opposed to, man, these are $60. I'm going to buy it and I hope it runs to 120 and then I'm going to sell it. Or I'm going to buy it and hope I hit the ultra rare. And if I don't, I'm going to unload it. And then I'm going to be pissed that now they're selling for 25 gems a piece. Like, how dare VeVe and how dare Gondek and how dare the artists? They should know better. Like, I don't buy that. And in a lot of the groups that I'm in, which I've kind of like muted on my Facebook feed, it's just gotten like real toxic where all these consumers are blaming the artist and the company for
that's terrible,
for creating a product. And I'm like, listen,
after they asked them and they came up with a product in short order, right? Like, it's no way they planned the Ukraine drop 6 months ago and had it. I mean, this is something that happened after the invasion between now and then. I mean, that is a quick to order to help people out. I don't see how you can fault the company for anything. I mean, that's just crazy to me.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was just going to get to that next one. So we've seen like the high art thing, and this is a really good example, which you addressed, the Ron English, the flag and the flower, the high art piece and the flowers. This is a good example. We just got some really, I think, important information about how philanthropic efforts will probably work in the future on VeVe, right? Like when it comes to raising money and it comes to them selling out. And then again, and what happens to it when people kind of are mad they don't 10x their or 5x their investment, right? Like they get upset.
In 3 days. They wanted to 10x in 3 days.
Right. So I think, again, for any investor out there who is just in it to make money, you're more than welcome to do that. I think I think if you do it the right way, there's money to be made. But just know that if you're not a fan, it might not swing your way because you don't know and understand the market.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, looking at philanthropic things and a lot of this high art stuff, if you're unfamiliar with it or you're trying to make a quick buck, it might go south, at least for you individually. I think, you know.
So here's the other problem too, right? Like, I think a lot of those pieces may see some value, but what we don't have right now that I think will drive that value is the ability to visit other people's showrooms. Some kind of like, I don't even need like utility for what it's worth. Not that, but if you're buying this art piece to say like, hey, like Nothmar said, I want to dedicate a specific part of my gallery to like this philanthropical wall. Well, that's cool, and you can have that in there. But I have no way. You have the VR app, but there's no way within V for me to be like, hey, let me go visit Nothmar's. Well, I guess you can. It's just kind of the whole thing just doesn't work out so well. So bottom line is, I think like once we can start seeing like the ability to really showcase what that art looks like, then maybe you can see some more. Not that I'm saying like, hey, I want to go flip it. That's going to be worth more, whatever it is. But I think with these pieces, you buy it for the sake of being built. I mean, you buy it for what it is, and then maybe down the line, as we start to see a little bit more, some kind of utility or the ability to showcase, I think they'll be great.
Yeah. My take though is like when people, the only problem, because I noticed, that's why I want to get, me, I if I could, I would have get 20 copies of all of those the failure to control, the weapons rack, the even the all these Pixars, but I know the market. We've all been watching it, right? It goes up, everybody's trying to triple or right off the gate, and then it drops. If it doesn't keep pushing, it's going to drop right away. Then you get stuck holding the bag if there's not enough demand. So for the ones that I know that I'm not sure of, I'm not gonna buy in right away. I'm gonna wait for it to settle down. But the ones that like I know long term it's guaranteed to go up, like Ghost Rider. So that one, hey, it was in the tens for like a little bit, so like I jumped in. If it jumped out of the gate, if Ghost Rider jumped out of the gate at 80, I would not have stacked it, right? So, but here it was at 1020 for a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, looks like people are dumping. They don't understand how important that is, and we know that as a comic book collector. But I mean, the other art pieces were not. I'm not sure. Maybe down the road, but just to be safe, I'm just gonna wait and let the price stabilize, and then I'll jump in, and then I'll see if I can stack. If it's high, I can't stack it. It's too risky. If it's low, like 10, $20, sure, I'll stack it, right? So, that's kind of my strategy, and I'm sure you guys all do the same thing. But
I got two of the flowers. One of the cheapest sets I think you can find right now, right? I think they're
flowers are cheap. Yep.
I think it's like $76 at one point last night. 76 for a set.
Yep.
And two ultra rares, one ultra rare, one rare. I forget how it is, but ultimately,
it's
just solid.
4 or 5 points, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, like the flag or the portrait, that's 7 MCP points, and we'll talk about MCP a little bit later because there are a couple things I want to touch on. But I think paying attention to that is also pretty important too. Now, before we move on, one last thing that dropped that I want to talk about is the Disney Pixar, which I think gave us a little moment of pause. I didn't buy any. I haven't yet. I may eventually. I don't know. But it's not like off to the races. Like it's not a Steamboat Willie thing. And I think we're starting to see these tiers, like the ceilings are starting to establish themselves, right? Where it's like, okay, if I'm going to spend $300 on a Woody, do I spend $375 on a Steamboat Willie? And if I'm going to spend $375 on a Steamboat Willie, do I buy a lenticular card instead? Or if I'm going to buy a lenticular card, do I buy a golden moment, right? Like now we're just...
But you just saying that just already shows how much you're familiar with the market, right? Somebody is buying it now, did not make that comparison, that you might be in trouble. You'll be like, dude, why did I pay $200 for a Pixar when there's a Steamboat Willie for $300 around, or lenticular Mickey or Minnie Mouse for almost the same price? That's a first edition. I would definitely go with the Mickey Mouse, right? That's like the same. But if it was like half price, maybe I would consider it, but not the same, right? So
yeah, and I think you're going to start to see these things kind of settle. We're seeing it now with the Marvel realistic collectibles, where you got your Spider-Man, and then you got your Captain America, and then you got your Sue Storm, your Black Panther, and they're all starting to establish their little places in the world.
Yeah.
When it comes to what's most valuable, same thing with the Mighties, not Mark. What I'm bringing that up because I think for me at least, it all goes back to Doom. Like, if I'm going to spend X amount of money on this Mighty, how much is a Red Skull and or how much is Doom? And if they were first and they're already popular, why am I not just going with them?
Yeah.
With that said, though, I am not, of all the ones that dropped today, I'm probably highest on the Woody. I mean, he has a first appearance. It's huge. Everyone grew up with the character. I think he looks great, but it's kind of hard to mess him up, right? Like, he's already just do what he was in the movies, right? Like, whereas, like, Steamboat Willie, he's never, we know he's never going to get the tag, right? He's never going to get the FA tag. And look, he is a cultural icon, but have I ever seen a Steamboat Willie outside of the app or outside of, I don't know, whatever, like whenever they pop up on articles? No, right? Like, I've never seen a show with him in it, right? So, I don't know. All I'm saying is I think Woody of all, and we've seen it because Woody was at like, what, 300 out of the gate, and now he's probably at 200, but I think eventually he becomes a solid buying opportunity because people love him, and I think that he's he's solid.
Yeah, I'm probably. If
they
I
also picked the wrong Incredibles character. I'm down. I do not like that they chose to pick her as the ultra rare Incredibles character. How do you waste that moment to do it with that?
I don't. It's weird. I guess we're all trying to read the tea leaves, right? Like, is there a method to the madness? Is it because we're getting a new Incredibles movie, or getting a spin-off, or we're getting something in the future, and maybe that's what we want? I think out of all those Pixars, I like, and if I'm gonna add to my PC, because that's what I was talking to Nothmar about this too, trying to figure out like my investment collection of like maybe buy and sell type stuff, and then like my PC that like I really want to have for the next 10 years just to see how all this runs. I think if I'm gonna make a PC purchase next, I like the idea of Woody and Lightning McQueen, as far as those go. So yeah, I think we're in an interesting spot where we're seeing the market. I think a lot of people are complaining.
Yep.
And that's okay. But that leads us to our next topic. So the dips. Mm-hmm. I've got 3 questions for you guys, and we'll just go in this order. My first question is, which dip have you seen that has been, I think, the most stunning for you, where you saw something dip and you're like, man, I can't believe it's that low now? Nothmar, was there anything that jumped out?
Oh man, that's let me think. I mean, the Spider-Mans went down. Hold on, let me think. I mean, the Partners definitely went down. Okay, Partners is definitely the big one because it was 42s, I think. Look for the floor now, it's in the 20, was something like 21, 24. So that is the big one. The Todds also went down, right, from 12, and now it's like what, 6K-ish now?
6.5, I think.
I was like, somebody was like negotiating to buy mine for like 7K, and I turned it down like 2 months ago. I was like, oops. So that was one. I mean, those are the ones that are the big ones that I follow. Definitely, I think Wonder Woman was starting to go up. The Jokers were starting to go up at 1,800, but they're still not bad, right? Joker's still 800, but it dipped like 1K, right? But it's still 800s. You know, the Spider-Mans, common uncommons, they're now in the 500 range when they were like near 1K before. Those who are following. The Mighties, of course, definitely dipped probably by like 2/3, you know, for the first appearances. So that was painful. Comics, surprisingly, it went down a little bit, but like I'm still way up, you know, in terms of because like a lot of the grails that I bought, I got them at like under $10, so I'm still up. But but they're holding ground as expected because they're grails, you know. As soon as I think as soon as it starts going down to like hundreds, people start buying them slowly, and to protect the floor. So I think that's a good sign, right? That there is some support levels for some of these big keys comics. So that one. So I know. So in my mind now, I'm thinking that a lot of you gotta really put your money into some of these key grails because they're, I think, the ones that hold the most value in terms of whenever there's a big dip like that just happened. Those are the ones that stick value versus the others almost collapse, right? The ones that are not first appearances or whatnot, they're probably, you know, collapsing harder. and you can't sell them, right? So
Right. Ray, what about you? Any dips that were sort of staggering?
Yeah, number one, I think you hit it, Wonder Woman. So I looked at Todd, and for me, Todd is actually still double what he was before the big pop. I remember I bought mine right at like 3.2. I sold my R2 for him. I still don't regret it. I still love my Todd. It's the one I always wanted, right? But like I bought him right at like 3.2, and then that's when like the last pump really started. He went like 2.6, 3.2 or whatnot, and then off to the races. So he's still at 50% of the high, but 100% higher than what he was before the pump.
Yep.
But Wonder Woman, I just looked, she's back down to 400, right? And I think she
Crazy.
started the pump at 333, and
Crazy.
at one point the peak it was like what 1.5 or something, right? So like
crazy.
she has completely regressed back to the starting point, and so that to me, I mean, I bought one. So I think I'm at 3 of them now. That's as close as I'm going to get to being a Nothmar stacker of these things.
I got 5, but like I think one I did buy for 400, but like the rest I got for low hundreds. So I'm still
exactly right. And so, but I think that's a big one for me. Wonder Woman was. I saw C3PO, Disney Golden Moments in general. I think fell a little bit more than I had expected them to. And then lastly, Batcroft, because that thing hit I think 450, which is
yes,
so sad to me, right? I should have just sold when it doubled. I would have been, much happier with myself. But nonetheless, I mean, that's one that we're going to see how the next market pump, right? Like we see some establishing new floors. I don't know what'll happen, but those two for me, Wonder Woman because it's a complete regression of one of the Trinity characters, right? And then I think Batcroft was very surprising. And then technically, if you invested in January, Marvel Comics 1 being back down to 280 after it hit like 700, that's got to hurt. That's got to hurt big time. Now, we're not hurting because, again, like you said, you bought in at $10, like none of this matters. You're talking like 28X versus 70X, which sucks, but you're not like in the red by any means. But people that bought in to that book at 6, whatever it is, now they're screwed. So, well, they're not screwed. I think the book, I think that's one of the best purchases, and we'll probably get there. But I think Marvel Comics 1 is probably one of the best purchases on the app right now, 250 or whatever it's going to go down to.
Yeah, the dips have been I think for me the Wonder Woman, so I think we're in a dip across the board, and we're going to get to the more stable things in a minute. But I'm looking at the things that it's weird. So if you were in before the big pump, you're still not down, right?
Yeah.
Like, so keep that in mind. If you started in January, you might be down, but if you started in January, now's the time to start hedging your bets a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the dips that were most staggering for me, Wonder Woman, probably is number 1. Batcroft number 2. The lenticular cards across the board.
So those I expected to drop.
I didn't see those doing well.
Those I remember that Goofy being like 4.2 and thinking, yo, if you have a Goofy, sell it now. Like sell that card because now it's at like 1.7. And again, if you paid $60 for it, you're still up. It's whatever. But those have, I think, a lot of the newer stuff. Whereas the Generation 1 stuff has maybe halved, and is down 50% from the high. Everything else is probably down, 66 to 75%, depending on what it was.
I'd say it was real far down as Steamboat Willie, which again, I always kind of predicted. I didn't think it would do that well. I thought it was kind of a trap card. I would have said sell it. If you'd sold it $12K, you'd have an R2 and a Todd right now. You'd be just crushing yourself. But right now, it is sitting at 3.3K. So
yeah,
I'm still up. I have one.
And you are?
Yeah, I bought it. I think I bought it at 2K-ish. So.
Nice. All right.
And that's the thing I think with these dips is as long as you're aware of where you are in the geography of it all, right? And you don't, as long as you can see the forest for the trees, right, and you can figure out what that looks like, I think you'll be fine. Now, so those are the biggest.
But that's what I'm saying. I think just to add to that one though, that's why you're seeing a lot of negativity in that big group, because a lot of them went hard, and a lot of them they went hard at the all-time highs, the probably month before it started drop. So I noticed a lot of people were showing off. They bought like a lot. They bought in. They probably put in like 5-10 grand, and then it collapsed, right? So that's why there's negativity. It's not natural, because that's why if I put in 10 grand and it collapsed to 1K, then of course then you're gonna go in, right?
You know what's really interesting is I was talking to, as I call them for Carmen, we talked to our gym guys, right? Like I got a gym guy, and he's still selling it like. So I got the last wave of 0.55 gems, right? Because when I bought the dip, I wanted to buy with 0.55. So anything I bought essentially is half off, and then whenever it goes up, like you're just like, I think it's crazy to me. I mean, we'll get to this, I'm sure, towards the end with final thoughts. But I guess I was talking to him like, hey, like, what gives 0.6? Like, how can you continue to do this? He's like, well, to be frank, I went too hard during the January pump, and now I've got credit card debt out the wazoo. But what hasn't happened is the investment paying off short term. So now you've got all these people who are, like you said, not more. Yeah, I'd be pissed too, but at my own self, not at the company, because it's not the company's fault. This is 100% an investment decision. This is not a like get rich quick scheme, right? It just isn't what it is, and we know that because we're looking 5 years out. But nonetheless, you've got people who are probably $5,000 in the hole, and now they need liquid cash. They're gonna yell at the VeVe group. They're gonna FUD, and then I think too, like if you're a guy that's ready to buy, why not FUD in the group and keep getting people to sell stuff? Because all you're gonna do is just scoop that floor up at so much cheaper, right? So I think it's a combo of one, some people who want the prices to drop, and then two, people that just went way too hard, and now they're sitting there staring at like a $5,000 bill with not the income to pay for it.
Now, okay, so with the dips, and I think we've also addressed this, there have been some players who are still doing okay. Like I feel like C3PO, yes, he's fallen to 4.5, but he's been back up to around 6.5. And all things considering, before this week, the market was recovering. Like I remember, like Wonder Woman was on her way up to 650. Like we can't forget that, right? So there are some collectibles and comics that are doing well. The one thing before we get started, I do want to say that I would say out of the comics that I'm a little disappointed in, but there's a reason why I have 8 Fantastic Four ones and only 2 Amazing Spider-Man ones. And Amazing Spider-Man 1 is one of the more disappointing ones because it was as high as 330-ish, and it's down. Like it was at 105 today. Yeah. Now, so was Fantastic Four 1, but Fantastic Four 1 didn't go as high as 330. So,
but so just to add to that though, like see the Amazing Spider-Man 1, I've been selling before the recent dip again, right? The market was hot the past 2 days. I sold like 20 comics, and I sold probably 2 ASM ones for I think 130 and 140. It went up because like the floor was something like 115. I put it like 10, 20 over floor, and I was surprised it sold out. And then now the market's dipping again, right? So I did see that there was some promise where there were people buying the floors. So so I think there is some support there. There are people who are waiting to get in more and buy some of these grails, right? So
now with that being said, we'll start with you, Nathmar. Are there any buys right now that seem stable to you, that seem more stable than other things, where you're like, oh, this really, it's not chaotic. It has a floor. It pops a little bit, but nothing too crazy.
Yes. I mean, I would stay. I was actually tempted because I made a lot of sales, and I was tempted just to get like 10 like Daredevil ones or 10 Fantastic Four ones or 10 ASM ones, because at 100 a pop, you can get 10, and I think that will grow again down the line. What instead as I did is I bought like 70 like Ghost Rider.
Jesus, awesome! I love it.
A lot,
I
a
love
lot,
it.
a lot, a lot of low mints too. So I'm loaded with low mints. So that's like I said, dude. At like I bought a lot of them at 10, $20. So I think I'm already up. It's up to 50, and I still think it should hit the same level as Daredevil one at 100 down the at least the next 6 months. So I think that's the one that I think is the best deal. But I was debating just getting more FF1 ASM1s, but I said, forget it. I think Ghost Rider was cheap, and I think the upside for Ghost Rider at right now, even 50. Oh, 36. Yeah, I just bought 15 yesterday at 36. It dipped again now. I think it's like 34, but I still think that's cheap, dude.
Yeah, I
I
think
100 at least.
it went down to I think 29 at one point. Yeah,
But
yeah,
for me, I buy on the dips. This is definitely a buy on the dip. Like
yeah.
if it keeps going down, I would keep buying them. Right.
Now,
So,
Ray, what about you? Is there anything that you see that's pretty stable?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Batman Series 1, right? Like, I think for me, this dip solidifies what was on the last dip of like the Grails, like we already said. Like, they're just not, they are much more stable purchases, right? So for me, Becky Batman right now would be a great at like 1.4, 1.3. That would be a great purchase. I like Joe Batman at 800. I think that's great. I think, like Nothmore said, any of the big three comics, I think, have probably found their floor. I realistically don't see them going. They might go under 100, but like I just don't realistically see them dropping much further than that because they're just going to get gobbled up, right? And then my one play, which I think will excel, I got to figure out some way to get one. I think Daisy and Donald skyrocket on the next pop. I mean, that is the first appearance of two huge Disney characters, and I love Donald Duck, and I think that will join the other golden moments soon. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. It just has not existed outside of a market dip. I think when it does, that thing is gonna. That's my like. If I had to buy an option, I'd buy an option contract.
my daughter was just watching Donald Duck right before this.
Yeah. Oh, see, I mean, they're great. I love Donald. I think he's just such a good character, and really, he's instrumental. He's up there with like the Hat, right? Like, I mean, he is the first appearance of a huge Disney character, unlike the Steamboat Willies or the lenticular cards or whatnot, right? So I think that's my. If I wanted to buy a Disney character, it'd be him. If I wanted to buy a Batman character, Wonder Woman or the Becky Batman. If I wanted to buy Marvel, the big three comics would be huge for me. I think Storm at 50 is probably one that actually I think I saw it down to like 45. I mean, for me, 40. That 40. Oh, shit.
I saw it like 41 today.
Yeah, so that seems like a pretty easy double up, right? Like if you want to flip, I mean, that's whenever the next bump happens, it's gonna fly right back to where it was at like 90. You can sell it, make your double up, whatever you want to do with it. But that seems like a pretty safe.
Well, Black Panther.
Spec.
Where's Black Panther now?
That I don't know. I was wondering that because I have a rare one.
Yeah, you can get Storm, the common Storm right now for 40 gems, which is, I mean, that's right back when I wrote that article. That's back like in November, December. And remember, she went as high as 140. Batgirl for me is like that. Like we know that Batgirl will get to 3 and change eventually again. Right now, she's at 80.
Yep.
Robin was as high. The Damian Wayne was as high as 350.
350. Yep.
Because I definitely paid 350 for one. You know what I mean? So that was kind of one of those. I know it was that high. A lot of these like second tier DC characters are great investments if you're trying to make some moves. It seems like all of the Powder Puff Girls are back down to like those regular prices that we saw in November, December. So those are some things that you could probably look at that are worth investing in. And the last thing I'll say about it, as much as people are complaining about prices being down, the silver lining is inventory is also way down.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Strange Academy is
that's right.
Just shriveled up.
Stupid down. Like here's the way I'm looking at some, especially Joe Bats is back down to 85 available in inventory. And it's if 200 comic book collectors show up on VeVe tomorrow in the world and want to drop $3,000 or something, the inventory's gone. Like it's gone.
Not far. Where you at, man? You can easily just scoop it all.
And that's kind of the interesting part about all of this, which also means I think we're due for another run.
It's hard for me to buy it because like I have 4 but I bought them at like I don't know under 100. So for me buying at that high, it's like I can't do it.
I know. Now, last thing, because we're actually we're almost out of time. We got about 15 minutes left. Before we get, I don't know if we'll have time for the final thoughts because there's the last thing that we hear a lot of chatter about. It's like I think we see in every room, in every message board, what VeVe promised and what they didn't give us and what we're owed. And I feel like their plan was IMX. We got that. Their plan was MTL. We got a lot of information about what that's going to look like in the very near future as far as Fiat's concerned. They told us that comics were going to go in the vault. So I have 4 questions that I feel like need to be answered. And I'll give you all 4 questions, and then I'll let you guys sort of pick whichever one you want to talk about. So the 4 questions. I feel like I now need answers for MCP. I need to know how MCP is going to be used.
Yep.
Question 2. If I'm going to use MCP, I need lobby. What does the lobby system look like? Okay. Question 3. Where is this VeVeverse and when can I enter it and share it with my friends and all of that? And then question 4, what does utility actually look like with rental stuff? I feel like those are the only 4 questions that I can think of. So first, do you guys have any more questions? And then second, what do you think of those initial 4? Nothmar.
I mean, those are good questions, but as you know, like for me, I'm less chasing like the MCPs a little bit because I'm more focused on investments. So, but like the MCPs are a great bonus because I think I'm gonna be covered because I have a lot. So, but yeah, I mean, if they have the notes out there, they have the documentation. It seems like they're ready to roll out, so that's why people are antsy because the detail is pretty significant, right? It's not just a high level. We have MCP, you're gonna get points. They have a full run book of how MCP is gonna work, so we think it's coming pretty soon. So I think that's good. The VeVeverse, I think that might take a little bit because I'm in IT. Something like that will take a while to build. So I'd be surprised if they come up with anything like this year. If they do, that's amazing. Otherwise, they probably just hired. I know they hired that game developer guy or something. Oh no, that's Disney. So they need to hire some sort of like gaming developers or whatever, and they can start building some sort of like VeVeverse from like that type of development. But that's gonna take a while. Utility again will be this part of that VeVeverse, so that's also gonna take a while. So our best shot at getting something this year is MCP and MTL. I think if we get those, I think that's a big win for them to start. And then if we get VeVeverse, that's a big plus. But I highly doubt that's coming, unless if they surprise me and hire like a lot of developers, that's amazing. So.
Okay, Ray, what about you?
Yeah, I think one new question. I'm not done letting them off the hook for MTL. I want to see beta updates. What percentage of you send it out to, right? Like you say, hey, each week we're expanding the amount of people. Well, where are we at right now? Where do we expect to be? I don't think that's again, I'm confident it's coming. Not so worried about that, but I would like to see. Because if they say, hey, it's next week, well, then in my mind, I can start planning because, I think the MTL dip, we're seeing it now. I think it all is starting to kind of play a little bit into it. But I want to know the MTL. I think the VeVeverse is a great question. I'm with you, Nothmar. I think it's going to be a ways off. I don't know that we see it
I think it's a ways off. I think it's a ways off. So.
But I do think, what's the question before that? Well, when are we going to see some actual quality of life community improvements to the app? Now, that's easy, right? How do we get a feed that works? how can I have a friend? Like, I can't even friend someone to quickly like pop up their page, right? I've got to sort through like my 100 people that I follow, and even then you got to hope it works, right? So like some quality of life things you could see are upgrades to the room, upgrades to the community page within the app. Like, I shouldn't have to go to Facebook to interact with VeVe consumers, right? I should be able to go to I should want to go to the feed. I should want to be in the app universe, right? Because that's better. I just think it's better for the company. And then I think your best question, though, Carmen, honestly, is the lobby system. They promised that back in January, right? I think last year they said it would be in January. We're now sitting in mid-March. Where's it at? MCP, I also agree, is a huge question. And I think that there's just been so many changes that my concern is going to be is they're going to be like, hey, comics are no longer going to get the diminishing returns, or they're going to switch to some kind of like set system. Like, we just don't know, because it's not. They haven't said here's the finalized program, right? So like, when MCP is coming is less important for me than what's the finalized MCP going to look like, or how are we going to get there? Because then I can start planning more. Because as an investor, you want to know, hey, what are your goals? What are you going to invest in? What's it going to net you? Well, I want to make sure that Rare Comics maintain the best MCP, because they could easily become the worst in the last iteration, right? And then all this purchasing of Rare Comics plummets. So
yeah, that's fair. I'm as I establish my personal collection, and then as I think about what I'm going to invest in, I think you find yourself at a crossroads where it depends on what kind of buyer you want to be. Like, if MCP gets me an opportunity to buy a copy of AF-15 and I can beat people to the punch and I don't have to compete with bots or anything else, that becomes an investment priority, because again, the end game is getting that comic. But if it's not going to allow me to get there, well, then it's going to become far less of a concern of mine. So I would really love to just some answers on how that works. And then, you hear all this buzz about whether it's Gary Vee and Recur, or Disney's talking about creating their own metaverse. I just would love.
Hey, I'm big on Palm. I will throw Palm into the conversation now that we know DC Comics and Palm is becoming a thing,
Yep.
and their spring the marketplace is coming. So,
and the question is like, what sort of? There's a lot of conversations about utility, and there's a lot of conversations about what an NFT actually does and what it gets you. And I just would love just some conversations about the VeVe team's prediction of what their utility is going to look like. We keep hearing utility, and when you talk about renting, we now need some answers. We need to know what the deal is with OMI staking. We need to know what's going to happen with renting, and why I would ever be interested in renting an NFT. Because that has to be, again, if we're talking about investing 5 years from now, I need to know what I'm going to get from staking $10,000 in OMI and getting a rental. Because if I can rent something and see a 1 gem a day ROI,
it's huge.
It's huge. That makes sense to me. I'm going to move my chess pieces around accordingly so I can make sure that happens. But if I'm hearing rental, and then you roll something out and it's whack, I'm kind of out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. At least acknowledge it, right? Like, that's the one thing that, I mean, they do have that AMAs that they have, that they kind of get feedback from people, but it's the same people that they're getting feedback from. That's the only thing. If they brought it up, like, because like I saw the post for Recur, and they're having that release, I think, tomorrow, and like everybody's raving how they listen to them about reducing the size of the mints, et cetera, et cetera. Here, like, we wish there's more that type of feedback, that we're getting from VeVe, in terms of like, hey, what are we looking for the rentals? What are we looking for, et cetera, et cetera. Oh yeah, and one thing that, like, we had that big discussion with Zach earlier. Like, he was bringing up that, like, VeVe doesn't listen to users. When the market was starting to pick up, they started dropping more books, which made the market kind of collapse again. That they should try to kind of listen and hold off on making big drops and let the market recover. And I was trying to argue against it because, I mean, dude, like, these guys are not gonna give away an opportunity to make, I don't know, how much do they make for each drop? Like probably a few hundred grand or 500K or whatever. They're not going to give that up. I mean, the marketplace, they'll probably is suffering right now, but they get profits from there, but they're not going to give away their ability to make a sale, right? That's
And
like,
not to mention, I'm sure Marvel and all the other licensors have some say in what drops and when it drops, right? Like, they're not like, hey,
you can't just back
Marvel.
up. Yep.
Yeah, like they're not like saying, hey, Marvel, I would like to drop this huge drop this weekend, make it happen. I'm sure Marvel says,
yeah,
hey,
that's cool because the market's dropping. Let's not drop it. I'm sure Marvel's going to be like,
they don't give a shit.
You're going to take away your license.
Exactly. They're just going to go to the next company that says, sure, Marvel, I'll do what you would like.
Yep.
And we just have to, and I think the community just needs to really, you don't have to buy every single drop.
You do not have to buy.
You don't, and let's the other people run, if they run a bot and the bot buys, if there's 1,000 of these things and one person runs a bot and they buy all 1,000 of them, you know what you do? Nobody buys them, and then it falls below the price anyway.
It'll crash. Don't buy it.
Like a lot of that X-Men book you can now buy that X-Men book below drop price.
Yep.
You can buy Bishop below drop price.
Yep.
You can buy the Flowers, Ron English's Flowers, below drop price. So it just is what it is. You kind of just have to hold tight,
Exactly. I mean, and also like strategy wise, right? Collectibles are like $60 a pop. Comics are like $6 whatever, 95, I think, I forgot. So if they're not gonna pop, dude, they're like $10. That's cheap. You can stack them versus like collectibles. It's harder to stack these Pixars because they're like 60, 100, $200. Like how many can you stack, right? The $200, $300 after the marketplace drops, right? You can barely lucky if you can get like one or two. But versus a comic, like I got the Ghost Rider, I got like 70, right? So you can stack those, and I know those are undervalued, that might go up. So I kind of, you got to look at your strategies, right? So not just like buy everything that comes out, right? So
right, and we might see a return where there are just still collectibles and comics in the actual store. Like when I first started in August, you could buy Batgirl from the store for 40 gems, or you could buy it from the marketplace for, she would go as low as like 38 and then would jump to maybe 42. And anytime she got to 42, I would just be like, I'll just buy her from the store.
So that's interesting. Like if market keeps dropping now, so this is something we can monitor, right? If the market drops every drop now, does that mean that there's gonna be less sellouts for drops? And then when there's less sellouts for drops, then again it's gonna establish like a lower floor. Nobody, once you get a drop at 60, you're not gonna be able to post it at 150 right away, right? There's gonna be stuff that's still available from the store, so there's no way people will buy you from 120 when they can buy from the store at 60. So they have to kind of still sell it at the 60 range. So I think there might still be more pain coming, right? If the downside continues.
Yep.
Well,
I mean,
go ahead, Carmen. I was gonna say, I just think it comes down to like assessing what you're buying, right? Like we're starting to see, like, as we keep going, there's going to be more dollar bin drops. There's going to be more, like, again, if Werewolf by Night 32 drops, or if we see, one of the big giant size X-Men drops, right? No, guaranteed not going to be a drop price, right? But like, I do think when we start and we continue to drop some of these like more niche indie pieces, or like the fourth, fifth appearance of somebody, like, I don't know. Do I go for that drop? Probably not. I don't know. I've gone for all the ones down just because I love the high of getting one. I think it's great. But I do think that you just have to continually, like, the S tier items, that's going to continually shift as we get new items that displace the old ones, right? When AF-15 comes in, what happens to ASM-1? That's going to be, and I would love to see that development. I have no idea what happens. Do they both skyrocket? Does one being AF-15 surpass the other one? Like, it's just, that's going to be a
So
really
it's
interesting show.
possible AF-15 is gonna go nuclear, and then nobody can afford it. Then the ASM-1 might follow going up afterwards. But I do see a lot of people selling a lot of their crappy comics that are not keys just to buy AF-15, right? I might have to sell a bunch too just to prepare for that.
Yeah.
But, you know.
That said, I think we are a far ways off from things remaining in the store. I think that's we would need months for me to be like, there's no chance I go with this.
If anything, we have to be prepared. There's more drops, a lot more drops coming. So, you know, if you have investments that are not going to hold value, you should take a look at them and start getting rid of them now. Focus on the ones that are strong, the NFTs that will hold value, the FF1s, the MC1s, et cetera, in my opinion.
Especially, like, I think a really good test right now, we are 2 weeks into March. Traditionally, Marvel does like a Mighty's launch on a Saturday, and they do a realistic collectible on a Saturday almost always. Like, I feel like they've done it almost every month since August. We can expect that to happen again. It's Women's Month. I'm thinking that we might get like a realistic Captain Marvel collectible.
I think Wanda's pretty far up there.
Yes, maybe a She-Hulk, like something that's in that world. And when that happens, it's probably going to be $60. And when you see that price point, you should probably look at your storms and your other things and say, like, okay, well, I kind of have an idea of how this is going to go. Do I need to pay 120 gems for this out of the gate? If looking historically back at these other things, we know how it's going to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping they have. I think we came up with a bunch of lists, like Sean was posting, like cool, like female characters, like X-23. You know, if they come up with that, that'll be dope. You know, and I think there was a couple more. Even like for me, Moon Girl, Riri. You know, if they drop those, then I'll be pumped, right? So because I have investments, physical comic investments there. So hopefully they diversify and they drop those, and that's gonna, at least for me, I'll be pumped. I'll pick them up, right? So
yeah, we have not seen a Star Wars drop yet, and there's an Obi-Wan Kenobi show coming.
Yep, Obi-Wan. They have Ahsoka. Come on, you know, they gotta drop all these Star Wars characters. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
I'm thinking May the 4th is probably going to be that weekend. Whatever, we can just expect some Star Wars stuff.
Well, start saving up.
But final thoughts, gentlemen, before we head out for the week.
I think we see a Doctor Strange and/or Moon Knight collectible in the next 2 weeks. There's no way they don't do something to play off either the TV show or the movie coming in the next month, right? That's one. Number two, I will say, we're going to do a fun conversation of, hey, how do we play the next pump? I think that would be that's way more than the final thoughts, but hey, what are you selling on the pump? What are you keeping? Because I still would not sell the Todd on the pump, because as we've seen, you may sell the wrong part of the pump and then it still doesn't dip back down to where you sold. But other ones maybe so. So I think that's an interesting conversation for another day, is based on what we've seen, how do you play the next pump?
Nice. We can do that. That will be a segment on next week's show.
Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be fun.
And I want to say, to add to that, like you say, how to sell take profits. If you have stuff that you have gained a lot, what do you want to take some profits? You know, you don't want to take everything out and just be out of the game, but take some to protect your gains, right? So, so I do the same thing with stocks too, right? Actually I don't. I hold everything. So
yeah.
I don't sell anything, even on drops that I'm getting killed. Like, it's all long term for me. So, but here I actually had fun selling these 2 days. I sold 20 NFTs. You know, that's kind of fun. I made some profit and I loaded up on Ghost Rider. So I think it worked out for me, right? So.
Nice. Well, gentlemen, as always, it was a pleasure. Everyone at home, thank you for tuning in. I am Carmen. We have Ray and Nathmar. Thank you for hanging out with us in the dojo. We'll see you all next week. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.